I'd really encourage any opportunity that people have to have some level of professional experience outside of their home country is going to really open you up, not just professionally, but also socially.
So you talked about a dependent visa. Um, you have not had a lot of experience about that, but what else do you know about it? Because sometimes when it comes to these visa issues, say someone gets married and then they move, then they have a dependent visa. Does that mean they can't work? Or if they get work, the organization has to sponsor their working visa? How does that work?
I think that is the case. And as far as I understand it, that is the case. If you're
Mm.
coming in as a dependent, you have somebody who will be catering for your needs. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't have that legal status to
To
get
get.
into formal employment. And I mean, I'm sure there are people who do it. You have the either the, just a regular visitor's visa or dependence visa. You can get around and do your own thing.
Mm.
But because the organization I moved to has very tight governance structures, it was one of the
Uh-huh.
requirements for me to apply and get the work permit. So I guess it also depends on your circumstance and the organization that
Mm-hmm.
you're joining. But for me, there's actually an expectation to apply and get that in my passport.
Okay. So you also spoke about peeling back layers. Have there been some cultural differences that you have felt, especially in the workplace? You hinted a bit about Ugandans saying or thinking that Kenyans are much more aggressive. Well, I think to some extent that is very true, as opposed to Ugandans who are relatively
I
laid
hope
back.
I hope I haven't been aggressive on the call so far.
No, 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 no. But what are some of those cultural things that you've discovered, especially in the workplace? I mean, we're all East Africans, but then again, the small, small things there where you realize, this is really different from what I know, from what I'm comfortable with. What have been some of those things?
Yes. So I think maybe I can speak about two different buckets. There's,
Mhm.
on the social, the social side of things, but also there's the professional side of things. And
Mm,
I don't quite know there can be a clear divider between the two because how we conduct ourselves with our families, with our friends, feels over into how we conduct ourselves with our colleagues.
yes,
So for
yes.
me, as I mentioned earlier, it's really the strength of a lot of the family units here who tend to gravitate towards each other.
Mm,
So, in retrospect, I think we have slightly more individuality in Kenya than
mhm.
is the case here. And that really came to my aid, like when I got my son and I had to go for surgery, and how family just rallied around me was nothing short of amazing. Everybody thinks of everything ahead of it, and you're well taken care of.
Mm,
um there's also a deference to respect
mhm.
um within that family setting. So you don't just talk anyhow.
Okay. Please,
So there's a
please
way
give us
people want
an
to conduct
example.
themselves. Yes. So like maybe a very simple example is when you're having a family gathering and at some point there'll be a call for attention and when you hear from, the head of the home, that can be either the grandfather, grandmother, father or mother, why we're here today, what's bringing us together as a family, and then everybody else speaks. So there's that deference for respect here. Um
How is it
and
done
yeah,
in
so I think
Kenya?
that, sorry.
How is it done in Kenya?
I wouldn't say there are any stark differences.
Differences.
Um, Not stark differences. I just feel that here it's slightly more pronounced, you know.
Uh-huh.
that deference to, the head of the home, the head of the family, it's slightly more pronounced here.
Mm.
Um, then what I've also noticed is, and we a lot of the times, and I don't know if this is just a construct within the urban areas, in,
Mhm.
Nairobi and Kampala. Um, in Nairobi, the mix, your social support was greatly around. It's a mix of family and friends.
Mhm.
It's a dynamic mix of the same. And here I'd say your social support structures are predominantly your family, you know, and how people rally around you to support you. So that's one thing I've noticed. But then again, this is a very subjective experience I have had marrying
Mhm.
to this family that I've married into. So that's just my experience and my point of view. That's far.
Mhm. I think what you've just said is right because I feel like perhaps because you just moved into UG, growing you're still growing your friend network, but in the near future it will probably be both, both family and friends
Yes,
rallying around you. Yes, yes,
yes,
yes.
yes,
Both
yes,
of.
yes,
Hmm.
definitely.
Have you felt like an outsider, especially in the workplace? I don't know,
Um,
or not just only the workplace, but also around. Have you had? Because before, one of the ladies said they sometimes get special treatment when people find out she's not a national. They give her special treatment, and then in other cases, it's been a little bit difficult because she has to navigate. What has been your experience of that?
um, I'd say special treatment. I haven't really felt, any, overt, special treatment coming my way. In the workplace, I think, coming back to it, we are a very multicultural team.
Uh-huh.
So that helped. That I think that also played a big role in helping me integrate. Very fast paced, very multicultural, and everybody just needs to do what they need to do. So in terms of fitting in, that wasn't too difficult. Socially, of course, I've mentioned things like in the market,
Mhm.
just try and learn one or two things, of how things are called. And then the most hilarious things are, like when sometimes you're taking a border or when you want to send a border somewhere, when a border has been sent to you, people, and I guess it's by default, they launch into Luganda, you know,
Mm.
and they'll go on and on and on and on and on and on. And then sometimes you have to say, okay, sorry, but could you please now speak in English? So sometimes, and there's a certain way when people are communicating using the local term, is a lot of, flavor. So there's some times when people either have to stop and interpret for you or repeat what they're saying. It almost feels like, the way you can be in a party and the DJ is playing the club banger of the season, and then you trip over his wire, you disconnect his speakers, and the room goes quiet, and everybody's wondering, okay, we need to pick up the pace again. So sometimes it does feel like that, but then
Mm.
everybody has been so gracious about it. Yeah.
Okay, I see. So some people have had really extremes of these experiences. That being said, what has been the biggest thing you've had to adjust to?
Um, there's a lot that has happened in the past 2+ years. It's just been a never-ending cycle of adjustments for me. And
Mm-hmm.
so the move forms just one cog of that entire gear
Adjustment.
system that I've had to engage. Um, I think in terms of not having my social networks close to me and just trying to make friends, at my age, when you're in your mid 30s, you're quite set in your ways and you have a
Yes.
certain way of doing things. So trying to establish those new friendships, it's not very easy. It's not
Mm.
very easy because people have, their way of doing things now. They have their tight knit groups already, and but
Yeah.
having said that, at least I've been able to meet amazing people through my personal networks, but also through my husband's network. So just that sometimes I feel like, I just want to get up and go have a cup of coffee somewhere and talk about everything under the sun that I want to talk about with a girlfriend. I have met some friends along the way, thankfully. I do have some, some of that, some of those opportunities, but
Mm,
definitely I don't have as active a social life as I did when I was in Nairobi. So that has been
mhm.
one of my biggest, biggest adjustments.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we don't realize the impact of what this whole social aspect or even community can have on an individual. Most times, some people might just be hyped about the move, but the nitty gritties of your networks, your social well being, so to speak, that hits you much later when you're in the thick of it and you're like, hey, I can't even call
Hmm.
so and so right now. I don't even know what they're
Yes.
doing right now. Maybe I need to have a face-to-face conversation. I need to, just take all this frustration onto someone who understands you. But then you realize, hey, they're miles away, and you cannot do it, and you
Yes.
cannot do
I
it.
mean, yeah, there's actually a concept I learned about called relocation shock, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there are some studies being done on, when you move much later in life, when you try and establish yourself in a new place, how does that affect you, not just mentally, but also physiologically? You know,
Oh.
and they're trying to figure out, does it actually affect you as a person more than we thought before? And it'll be interesting seeing, some of those results of some of those studies, or some of that discourse over the next couple of years, because we are becoming more and more and more mobile.
No,
And it's
but
just going to become
yes,
the reality of our going
that
forward.
is very true. So, what are some of the pros and cons of living and working, outside your home country, especially in another African country? What are some of those things that you've experienced?
I think in terms of, I think some of the cons I've already talked about them.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have your networks to leverage, and you've spent years building those networks.
Yeah.
Um, and you're just, trying to learn a new way of doing things, a new culture, new people. Um, you know, we we do a lot of work at the policy and regulatory level. So, you're learning afresh about the different government bodies and agencies and individuals and departments, and it's quite a steep learning process. But
Mm-hmm.
on the plus side, you're actually sharpening yourself, because once you learn how to navigate a new culture, once you learn a new way of doing things, I think you're never the same, in
Yep.
life. So
Yep.
any I'd really encourage any opportunity that people have to have some level of professional experience outside of their home country is going to really open you up, not just professionally, but also socially. It'll
Mm-hmm.
help really sharpen things like your EQ. Take it. Whether it's for a short term, whether it's for a medium term, it really can only work positively. So for me, I do know that having that work experience in another country on my resume at the end of the day is going to count for a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the biggest con. It was almost like a trade-off, because I now don't have my professional and uh, social networks to leverage on, but I'm positioning myself slightly differently for other
Mm-hmm.
opportunities. And as it would turn out at the end of the day, I've exponentially been able to grow my connections by having people who are rooted here on the ground and who I can reach out to, who I can work with. And it just serves to work for years. So I think that the fact that I've grown my networks so organically here in Kampala, Uganda, will only add to my value as an employee in future. So it's actually served as a very big plus for me.
If someone, if say perhaps, I don't know, a friend is moving to Nairobi, a Ugandan, what do you think would be like the reverse shock or like the reverse, you know, what are some of the things you think they would have to adjust to now that you've stayed in both countries for some time?
Mhm. Um, Definitely, I feel that there's a high possibility of it being a slightly more lonely move, doing it in the reverse.
Oh.
Um, and but again, that depends greatly on, the networks that you're moving into and the reason why you're moving. But
Mm-hmm.
I feel that Nairobi is slightly more fast paced and people just have, their heads, focused on what they need to do.
Uh-huh.
Um, I feel that here will give you slightly more time, and tolerate you a bit more, as you adjust. But Nairobi might be a bit faster paced. So
Uh-huh.
anybody should get ready for a bit of, that shock. The food, there have been quite interesting debates, between Kenyans and Ugandans. And Kenyans are like, you know what, your food, we can't do your food. And Ugandans are like, Kenyans, we can't do your food. So
Because it's of less
I guess,
variety.
so it's quite that food debate is quite a hot button topic. And I think we've also seen it happening between Ghana and Nigeria with
And
their jollof.
Nigeria.
So the food is something they need to adjust to as well. For me, I know if ever we are to leave Kampala and go back to Nairobi, I know I wouldn't get as many and as abundance of fruits and vegetables in the sizes and the freshness as I get them here in Nairobi. So that's just, I love my fruits and vegetables. So yes. So there's a loneliness, and that of course
Huh.
depends on um
What
your
you're moving into.
circumstances. There's the
Mm.
food, but I think greatly, what we call matatus, what you call taxis here,
The
operate in the
border.
same way. Borders, you'll have a lot more borders here, but they still operate in the same way as in Nairobi. We have tech. I mean, like, your app works across countries, whether it's Uber or whatever. So tech is really changing things. Yeah, I think really those two things,
I
the
see.
social life and the foods, yeah, would be different.
All right. So in most cases, when you're moving, if it's to the west or wherever, the questions are not very many, or the concerns are not as many as if you tell your people, I'm moving to another African country. So, two
Oh yes.
questions. One, uh, what would what advice would you give that person so they can finally get the family on board or the friends on board to, sort of give them their blessings to move without pampering them with all the fears and negativity of moving to another African country? And two, what should that person keep in mind when they are deciding to make this move?
Yeah. Yeah, so definitely, and I'm currently a student of economics, and we are told, you don't make a business plan unless you've identified already markets and an opportunity. So it's about, I think, if you're moving for professional reasons,
Mhm.
it's cultivating people around you to understand the pluses that are going to work for you in future. Whether
Mm.
it's exposure in an industry that you're finding difficulty getting into in your home country, or whether it's, a market or an industry that's at a different level of development that you want to go and explore in another country, you can always let them know what that opportunity is. And then I think the other thing is knowing that, especially if you're moving from one African country to the other, and I don't know why we do this to ourselves, there'll be a lot of negativity that comes your way, in
Yeah.
terms of, are you sure it's the right move? But they do this that way in that country. They don't do things this way in that country. So you need to be very pragmatic and know you'll get, some of that negativity. You need to put it in its proper context, and the context you're putting it in is the reason why you're moving.
Mm.
And then just, I think, also trying to expose your family and build their positive curiosity about the place that you're moving to. I think I talked about that positive
Yes.
curiosity earlier. You know, news that's positive about that place, news that's interesting, opportunities coming up, different experiences that you're bound to have. You might want to open up their mind in that way. But it's
Mm.
definitely going to be a mixed bag. And I feel, despite your best efforts, you might not necessarily be able to control the narrative and,
Yeah.
positively radicalize everybody around you to begin with. saying good things about this place. But I think also we play a very unique role as Africans who have moved to other African countries. And that's educating our friends, our families back home about the merits and opportunities that exist from the country that you've moved to. So we can act as each other's ambassadors. I mean, at the end of the day, we are one region. Our histories, our futures are so intricately connected with each other. We need each other to survive.
Yes,
So I really believe that Africans who have moved to other African countries can play that active role of being ambassadors, both ways, for their home country where they're from and for their chosen country where they're settling in, and just share some of the positive, good news and opportunities with the people on either side of it.
that's very important. And I think
Very, very.
sometimes we don't understand this ambassadorship. I mean, we don't have to be appointed first, but with the people you meet, how you act, how you receive the people you're meeting, how you put across your opinions, how you even just your curiosity, you know. I think that's also a big packaging of ambassadorship. And I think when people become more intentional about being good ambassadors, then perhaps that will really help us to move faster in the direction of being more warm and welcoming to ideas of us moving across borders, you know. And I think that
Definitely. Yeah.
the media doesn't do a lot of, it's always, as you said in the beginning, bad news sells. Bad news sells, and I don't know, we need more exposure on the good side, like real stories, leave alone the
Yep.
socialite stories and all, but the real stories of an everyday person. So yeah, I
Mhm.
think that is something very, very important that we as Africans need to work on. So
What you've said has just triggered my thinking about it. It's
mm,
about the content we consume. But if you
uh-huh,
look at the proliferation of digital media these days, there is such a wealth of content being created people like you and me, about the places that they live in, their daily lives, their work lives, their social lives. And that's another channel people can use
yes,
to, you know, either inform or teach people about where they're from and their home countries, or the reverse, you know, teach people who remain in their home countries about this new place that they've, settled in. So digital media has a growing wealth of content that we can tap into to use for education.
that is very, very true. Any last words before we close this session?
No, it's just been such an interesting conversation, and I really think you're onto something. Talking to Africans who move to other African countries, as working professionals, that is really the future that we need to aspire to. Free movement of the factors of production, including labor,
Mm,
and hearing more about people who've made that move will really encourage a lot of people out there to begin looking at it as an opportunity and not a threat to their career.
so for me, all I can say is that thank you so much. Like uh, the people I've spoken to so far, everyone has a different mind-blowing story, how they ended up where they ended up, what their experiences are, and actually connecting the dots backwards. It's so amazing. So thank you so much, Diana, for taking off time to share your story. Really, because sometimes also we don't hear a lot about people who have moved for love in Africa, at least. In
Yes.
Africa, for other countries,
Yeah.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
stuff there. But I'm also happy that you brought out the fact that the aspect of support. Perhaps if there's someone out there, if you hear your friend is moving, it's good to ask about the marriage and all, but also asking about the individual. Really, I think we
Hmm.
constantly forget
Yeah.
about the individual. So perhaps moving forward, we should all be more intentional about asking about the person, and then of
Yes.
course union, because when something happens, it happens to the individual anyway. And you need to help this person um, see the bigger picture that's beyond
This
the
is true.
union, which is also the individual as well. So, Diana, thank you so much for taking off your
Thank you for
time.
having me.
Have a lovely day to all our listeners. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Catch you next time on the next episode.